Good to see you, Senator and Assembly Member. I'm Senator Troy Hashimoto from Hawaii, and I'm happy to host this next segment of the program today with my good friend Adam Roversi from the island of Kauai. And he has done a tremendous amount of work on the housing front. And I'm really excited to see what he'll have in store for you today. Our session today is a rural county builds social housing. And I think he has really figured out a way, and it's a very long project that they've been figuring out for many, many years, but they've really figured out a way on Kauai to really lay the hard part of housing down. The county does it, and then they ask private developers to just build. So I think this would be a great presentation that he will share with you. I think it's a model that many governments can use throughout the nation to build housing in a more affordable way. But just a little bit about Adam. He is the director of the housing agency in Kauai County, and his goal has been to create permanent long-term housing for as many folks on Kauai as possible. Before serving as the director of housing, he was a deputy county attorney and taught legal writing at the Richardson School of Law at UH Manoa. And he's also the coach for the Hanalei Canoe Club and serves as the vice chair of the Kauai Bar Association and vice chair of the board of the Ho'ike Community Television, and regularly volunteers at the Fifth Circuit's Self-Help Center. So we are really thrilled to have Director Roversi here today to share his knowledge. And a quick logistical note before we get started, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A chat, and we will try our best to answer as many questions as we can following Director Roversi's presentation. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Director Roversi.
Thank you so much, Senator, and congratulations on your recent appointment. If everyone bears with me while I share my screen. Okay. Senator, can you see that okay? Is it coming through?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. My quick introduction. I appreciate everyone else's fabulous presentation so far. So for a rural island with none of the type of high-rise developments that have been highlighted in a lot of the other projects, we've got kind of a rule of thumb that you can't build anything on Kauai higher than the tallest coconut tree. We have about 75,000 residents on Kauai, and we have a level of county resources relatively commensurate with our small size. But that doesn't protect us from sort of a desperate housing situation here. So these exact numbers change, but the last time I checked, Hawaii had the highest home prices in the country, and Kauai County has the highest home prices, median home prices in the state of Hawaii. We also have the highest percentage of homes on Kauai in the state used for transient vacation rental purposes, which puts a strain on residential housing. And more than a quarter of our residents who rent pay more than 50% of their gross income in for rental costs. So I'm going to move through these slides here. I want before I talk about the Kauai current model of housing, I want to put it into context by sharing a little bit about how we got to where we are. So the Kauai Housing Agency began as a single-family home developer in partnership with the state, primarily partnering with private developers, building single-family homes on state lands in the 80s, into the mid-80s and late 90s. And these homes were usually sold through a lottery system to residents at somewhat subsidized prices, but there were little or no long-term affordability requirements imposed on these. So while there was some government subsidy going into this single-family housing process, it was more or less captured, if you will, by the people who were the lucky lottery winners of the homes. And because the homes shortly after sale essentially became market rate homes, we were generating housing, but we weren't generating a pool of affordable housing stock in any meaningful way. Then with the advent of LIHTC tax credits and federal home and HTF grant programs, our development model shifted to multifamily rental projects, away from single family housing development. And but at least in the early years, our projects were largely dependent on inclusionary zoning exactions from private projects, requiring developers to provide a percentage of rental units when doing resort projects, as for example. And while we got to a point of requiring up to 20 years of affordability, the county had no ownership interest generally in these projects. And at the end of affordability periods, these projects also flipped to market rate projects. And in those situations, the private developers were ultimately capturing any government subsidy that went into the projects. And we still weren't, like under the single family model, we weren't creating a growing pool of affordable housing. It's sort of a conveyor belt of unit production, but not really affordable housing production in the long term. So we have switched maybe in the last 10 years to a kind of to a new model. And that doesn't mean we've turned away from LIHTC projects or inclusionary zoning entirely, but we're looking to take our destiny into our own hands somewhat by being a more active developer of county-owned projects. So we're expanding the size of the projects that we're working on to large-scale subdivision development, and retaining county ownership of the project, typically through ground lease situations, so that we can ensure effectively the affordability of these projects in perpetuity and create a growing pool of housing, as opposed to a conveyor belt of unit production that flips to market rate after some arbitrary deadline. So some of the key elements of what we've moved into is that we're looking to acquire or identify existing county land, and then offering it to private partners under long-term ground leases. The county does all the pre-development studies to entitle properties, including environmental and historical review, which in Hawaii can take a very long time and adds a lot of unpredictability to projects that make it difficult often for private developers, or make private developers unwilling to engage in housing projects. We deal with all the zoning requirements at both the state and the county level, and generally handle the installation of offsite infrastructure to make specific projects shovel ready. And then we continue to utilize our federal grant funds and a small pool of county housing development funds to package these properties that we've prepared for private developers to construct and operate projects. So typically in multifamily situations, we're looking for a development partner to build, run, and manage the property. And then at the lease agreement, the county becomes the owner of the entire project. So we maintain control of the project, and we do the same for single family home production as well, selling the homes under long-term lease agreements. But I'll say a little bit more about that in a future slide. So this is an image of our Kauai Makana multifamily rental project. This was the largest rental project that Kauai has produced in the last more than a decade. So it's 134 units, built by a private partner on county-owned land under a 65-year ground lease agreement. At the end of that lease agreement, the project becomes county-owned. So this was a LIHTC project. So it is serving generally 60% and below households on Kauai. It's near the Poipu Resort area. And we acquired this property through a exaction on the Kukui'ula Resort, an inclusionary zoning exaction on the Kukui'ula Resort development. So this is not exactly the sort of large scale model that we're currently following, but it shows a little bit of our evolution in that we retained ownership of this property whereas our past practice would be to require a developer to build a project on their own land, and it would only be affordable for a short period of time. This is 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And this is another example of our most recent workforce rental project. Again, this is a property that was built on county land by a private partner under a long-term lease agreement. And after the conclusion of the lease, the entire property will revert to county ownership. This also is a LIHTC project, workforce rentals, serving primarily people at 60% and below area median income. The next slide represents sort of what Senator Hashimoto is talking about and our new model. So this is the county's first effort at large-scale development. So this is our Lima Ola project in LA on Kauai. It's 75 acres in total to be developed over 4 phases. And at full build out, we expect to have about 600 homes, both multifamily rental projects and single family leasehold homes. Phase 1, which is at the bottom of this map, was completed in 2021. And all of the phase 1 multifamily projects are currently under construction. And we expect the first multifamily project, which will be a 32-unit supportive housing project for homeless families, to be ready for move-in in January of this year. This is just another representation of that same project, and phase 1 is the lower portion where you can see road construction already happening. And here's one of the projects that's currently under development. They're putting roof trusses up as we speak. This is a 40-unit rental project for seniors, all 1 story, but relatively high density for Kauai standards at least. Being built again on county land within phase 1 of the Lima Ola project by a private partner. Right across the street, wrong way. Right across the street, built by the same private partner, is a 45-unit workforce housing project. Again, this is also a LIHTC dependent project. At the heart of Lima Ola, the county is developing a community center that will serve the entire neighborhood with skate park, basketball courts, picnic gazebos, and a meeting room and commercial kitchen for the community's use. This next slide shows sort of the overall phases of the project. Phase 1, which is at the bottom, as I mentioned, is fully under construction with infrastructure complete. Phase 2, we expect to start infrastructure work in late 2024. We're currently developing all of the engineering and construction plans for phase 2. And lastly, this is an image of our single family home portion of phase 1 at Lima Ola. So we have 38 single family homes on relatively small lots from about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. We're going to be building 2, 3, and 4 bedroom homes. And this is the county's first real venture into single family home construction since the 80s. And we will, as I mentioned before, be offering these homes to buyers with the county retaining ownership of the land. And we'll be offering the homes for sale as 99-year limited appreciation leaseholds, which can be sold, can be deeded to your heirs, and the 99-year lease is also subject to renewal. So a little bit about our 99-year limited appreciation leasehold model. So it's based on a National Community Land Trust lease template. It results in order to offer, and it's important to note that we're with Lima Ola and sort of this large scale development model. We are doing our best not to rely on LIHTC and have just a low income community, but we want to have a mixed income community. So our single family homes are going to be available to families earning up to 120% of area median income. We will offer some level of government subsidy to ensure that the initial purchase price serve that income range of folks. But given the relatively higher income of 120% families, we hope to be able to provide that the construction costs will be near the purchase prices and not require a great deal of subsidy. So we require owner occupancy, and we verify that annually. So once purchased, these homes can't be rented. There is a county buyback provision. So if at any time the terms of the lease are violated, we can enforce a county buyback and then would resell the home to another qualified Kauai resident. And at any time, if the purchaser desires to sell the home, they can, but they do so at a pre-calculated resale price that's embedded in the lease itself that shares a portion of the appreciation with the county. So I guess we envision these limited appreciation leases as a midway point between renting versus fee simple ownership. The buyer is able to realize, as the title says, limited appreciation, but some appreciation, to move on, to upgrade, to pay for college expenses, etc. But they don't realize appreciation to such a degree that these homes at resale effectively flip to market rate homes. And again, we're sort of taking the cost of the land out of this equation to keep the prices affordable. And our lease fees are nominal, $1,000 or so a year, broken out in monthly payments. So that doesn't make a large part of the equation. And again, the purpose of this model is really to create a growing pool of affordable housing, rather than housing production that continually flips to market rate. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're paying for this. So this graph my staff put together represents, or quickly for context. So in our traditional model of housing development, we would package a piece of land, go through an RFP process, award the property to a private developer with a very small amount of county subsidy. And our development partners would then go to the state, Kauai Housing Finance Development Corporation, to seek additional funding. And sometimes they received funding and sometimes they didn't. So we could never guarantee that the land that we had prepared for development would in fact be developed in the near term, at least. And the green line in this chart represents the amount of funding going to Kauai County through the annual state allocation process. And you can see that at least until 2021, where we got a thankful increase, the Kauai allocation of state funding is almost indistinguishable from the x-axis on the graph. So when we embarked on the Lima Ola project, and we're spending a good deal of money to acquire the land and to put in infrastructure, when we found private partners to develop the property, we wanted to be sure that the projects would be developed in the near term and not be dependent on this state competitive funding process. So we implemented our own private activity bond program last year. Traditionally, all the counties in Hawaii have bond authority, private activity bond authority under a federal statutes, but all counties until last year really had opted to just have their bond capacity revert to the state, and then the funding would be administered through Hawaii Finance Development Corporation. But like I mentioned, we wanted to control our own destiny and ensure that the projects that we chose, were developed on a timeline of our choosing as well. So we retained our bond cap, and last year did our first $25 million bond issuance to fund the multifamily projects at Lima Ola. So we hope to continue this. I think it was successful. We were the first county in Kauai, the first county in Hawaii to do this in some time. I know the city and county of Honolulu is doing the same, but I'm happy to say I think we beat them to the punch and got ours got our bond issuance out first. Looking forward to other projects following the Lima Ola model. The center rectangle of land here is 400 acres in Waimea on the west side of Kauai that the county acquired about 3 years ago. Not exclusively, but largely for affordable housing. This next slide is a preliminary master plan that was developed by our planning department, sort of laying out the use of the entire property. And as you see from here, roughly 32 to 34 acres of the property has been designated for affordable housing, which is near the existing town core of Waimea. So we are moving into agricultural land, but preserving a great deal of this property as agriculture. Following our model of focusing development in or adjacent to existing town cores and not creating sort of subdivision sprawl in rural areas. So we're beginning, as we speak, an additional master planning process to fine-tune the community's vision for the housing portion of this property and what mix of multifamily versus single family the community desires, along with other amenities. And then, so this is one of the current projects we're pursuing, and this is the third. So along with Lima Ola, this will be our third large-scale property development project that the county is taking the lead on. So the lot in green and the lot in red are added together, about 50 acres on the north shore of Kauai, adjacent to the existing plantation town of Kilauea. It's the largest non-resort residential area on the north shore of Kauai, which is also one of the most expensive areas to live. So we acquired the parcel in green in September, and to demonstrate the county's sort of high level of political will to do these large-scale developments, we're acquiring the parcel in green through a condemnation action. We were unable to reach a meeting of the minds with the owner, so our county council and administration pressed ahead with condemnation, which the court ruled in our favor actually just last week. So we're moving on the final acquisition of this property. And like the Lima Ola project and the Waimea project, we'll begin to do all the pre-development work and a lengthy community master planning process so that the housing agency's work on this property reflects the community's desires and the community's vision for what it should look like. And like Lima Ola, we expect that there will be a mix in both Waimea and in this Kilauea property of both single family and multifamily properties, and as well as a mix of income levels. But we are statutorily required, at least currently, to develop only affordable housing. So we're constrained by our county ordinance from doing market rate housing in these projects. And we're potentially considering some ordinance changes to allow some percentage of market development in order to help subsidize our affordable housing work. But we can go up to 120% of area median income in these projects. And this is my last slide, but I wanted to just add a couple of challenges that we face. We haven't worked out all the kinks in sort of our model yet. So I'm excited to learn from everyone else here as well. So as you probably gathered from the discussion of the Lima Ola project, for the multifamily portions of that work, of that development, we have still largely been dependent on LIHTC funding. So we are scratching our heads and exploring ways to fund, in particular, multifamily rental projects that are not dependent on tax credit financing, so that we can broaden the income groups that we're serving. And we're excited that a couple of years ago, the state created a rental housing revolving fund to serve households up to 120% of area median income. And we hope that that is perhaps reauthorized in the future and could be a source of potential funding for these sorts of projects. Another barrier that we're facing, in particular to the single family lots, is that when we created these subdivisions and structured the developments, interest rates were down at 3.5%. Now that interest rates are at 7.5% or so, it has become challenging or more difficult for our income qualified single family buyers to find private market financing. So we are largely dependent on the private market to finance these leasehold homes. So we're working out the details of that as we speak for the first 38 single family homes at Lima Ola, and may need to offer some level of county subsidy through second mortgages or something along those lines in order to help our buyers qualify. And we're also, although this is expanding for these leasehold property sales, we do have a smaller pool of willing and ready lenders than if we were doing fee simple sales. So the options for our buyers are more restricted, but so far haven't been a dramatic impediment for sales. And that's the end of my presentation, but I'd be happy to obviously answer any questions. Stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you, Director. Very interesting and great presentation. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them, as many as we can, as time permits. But I guess the first question, Director, is, I think you and I have talked a lot about this, but maybe you can highlight some of the challenges that, may have been before you, but I think you're fully aware of it, of getting to this point of being ready to build, right? I think there's probably a lot of hoops that you have to jump through, and probably a lot of things that you learn that that you're going to fix in these upcoming projects. Maybe you can highlight some of those things for us that, will possibly speed this process up, and maybe just give some folks some context of what they might have to watch out for.
Sure. So in preparing Lima Ola for development, it took us, like I mentioned, we're getting ready to have the first people move in January of 2024. But the county purchased that property almost 10 years ago. So it was a lengthy process to get where we are today. And I think our impediments were probably threefold. One of the prior presenters mentioned the need for government experience in affordable housing production. So that Lima Ola project had been the first time that the county housing agency had ever undertaken a large scale subdivision development like that. So we needed to, it took us a while to generate the internal expertise in order to properly proceed. So we made some mistakes along the way, but I think we've gone some way to being better placed to do this more quickly in the future. Aside from that, we faced an impediment of funding. So the county, until just last year, had no regular or stable source of funding for our housing development fund. We've had a housing development fund for many years, but it has always been funded sort of as ad hoc budget item and had no reliable, steady stream of funding to allow for long-term planning of projects. But that was an ordinance that was created last year, which has created a percentage of real property tax that will automatically go to that fund. And the last impediment was the entitlement process in the state. We particularly had very lengthy processes to Lima Ola was agricultural land, so it had to be redistricted through the land use commission process. And also rezoned on the county level. And at the land use commission, we faced community intervention to the redistricting of the property. And we also had a very lengthy process of SHPD, or State Historical Preservation Division review, as part of that entitlement process. So those two things, as well as the environmental review, probably added maybe a total of 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years to the approval and entitlement process. But I think we're going to be faster in the future. And some of the lessons learned, while we did have a community involvement and community planning process for Lima Ola. I think we've learned to be even more robust in that community engagement process. So by the time we go to the Land Use Commission or to the Planning Commission for entitlements, we are representing the community's vision and have full community buy-in on the process, so that we don't have, the not in my backyard problem of development.
Yeah, well, quite a lengthy process. I think we at the legislature, we tried to help you with, at least with the State Land Use Commission this past session. Unfortunately, that didn't make it, but it got very, very close. But I think this is one of the reasons why we pushed for it, because I think all the counties should be doing this and taking it through this process and taking off the pressure off developers to just allow developers to build. Now, I guess, Adam, there's a really good question in the chat that really asked, what do you think is your estimate in the cost reduction of having the county doing all this pre-work? What do you think is the net benefit or the cost that the end user is seeing? Or, possibly, do you think even we would even get the units if you left it up to the private developers? Maybe you can talk a little bit about both of those things.
Sure. Well, to the second part of your question first, the County Housing Agency is the largest developer of residential, non-resort residential housing on Kauai. So there has not been beyond a 4 or 5 unit project here or there. There has not been a large scale. Was not counting about 10 years on Kauai. So I would offer that if the county wasn't doing this, the homes in the price point that we're developing, $400,000 to $500,000 for single family homes and affordable rentals, would not be being developed on Kauai. I don't believe. As far as the cost benefit, so using Lima Ola as an example, land costs and infrastructure costs in phase 1 amount to about $110,000 per unit. So if we use the single family homes as a model, again, we're still we're working on we're going to pre-sell the homes, and our development partner will, through that pre-sale process, have construction to permanent loans for the buyers. So we're hoping that the construction costs and purchase price work out without needing additional county subsidy. But the county is not looking to recoup the land and infrastructure costs in that sale process. So you could say up front, we're subsidizing the single family homes to the tune of $110,000 each up front to hit the price points that we're seeking to hit for that 120% area median income group.
But in a scheme of things, what can you give us an example of what other, like a LIHTC project? What do you think your average subsidy is there on Kauai? Probably double, right?
For the LIHTC rental units, double or triple.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
So you're getting a pretty good bang for your buck with this concept, right?
Yes, and we are as we mentioned, kind of with the evolution of our development model. I think it's important that we are creating effectively a permanent pool of affordable housing, which pays off in the long run.
Now, do you have any concerns over the 99-year leaseholds? Like, how do you feel that you guys are going to be able to manage that over time, or making sure that the rentals are sustainable, right? In terms of, because I would assume a private manager is going to run the private rentals once it's starting to be rented out, or your rentals will be rented out, managed by a private company, right? Not the county, I would assume.
Correct. So we have an existing, we've had our limited appreciation leasehold program for about 20 years now. And we have, so Lima Ola will be our first large scale development, but we have about 30 homes in that program currently that we've developed 1 or 2 a year over time. And we manage compliance for those projects ourselves. But we're required under the county code to, at some point in time, although it's not exactly determined, convey all of the county's leasehold properties into a community land trust. So at some point, we will look to stand up a community land trust that will take ownership and management of the county's leasehold properties. And they would then, that trust, which will be partly governed by the homeowners themselves, will be responsible for compliance and repurchase when necessary, buyback provisions, and so forth.
Great. I think the other very interesting thing is, and maybe you can just explain, I know you explained the private activity bond sources, but my understanding is you also got some federal funding, right? That, direct appropriation federal funding from the previous Congress. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think that is very unique, right? Because the county's developing it, you can tap into these resources, and you're not going to be able to get it on every project, but when you're lucky, you get it. And that's a huge amount of money. That's not a traditional pot that you typically see in housing development, right?
Yeah, we're very appreciative of the federal funding that we've received for Lima Ola. And that, so you mentioned before about, how long did it take to get where we are now? And I think in the early stages of Lima Ola, when we were seeking additional funding from the state or the federal government, it was sort of, I think there was a level of skepticism that we would succeed in the development and get to where we are. But having successfully developed phase one, and the infrastructure, and we now have something concrete to show. We've showed our capacity and our ability to largely self-fund with state assistance, phase one. So when we bring our federal partners to this project and show them what we have successfully accomplished, success breeds more success, I guess. So it has our ability to get where we are has attracted almost $20 million for future in federal money for future phases of Lima Ola. So they've seen that we can produce the infrastructure and the subdivision development that we've pledged that we were going to produce, and we produced it on budget and on time, which makes us a more attractive investment partner / recipient of additional federal assistance.
But the beauty of that money is it's not AMI restricted, right? It has to be affordable, but it's not the 60% and below rates. It's more flexible funding that you can go up to your 120 that you're trying to aim for.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So that's, to me, that's the beauty of the whole thing, and the county leading the effort, because you can tap those funds that no private entity would be able to do. So I guess when thinking about how others should set this up, what do you think their first steps should be to replicate this model? Like, is it a personnel thing? Is it getting the mayor's buy-in, or is it finding the piece of property? What do you think are those elements that you need to put something like this together?
So I think firstly is just political will. That's the first step, because what we are doing is not entirely uncontroversial. I mean, we have people within our government who still believe that housing development is not the government's job, that should be private developers who are doing this, and the market that is providing what we need. But I guess, as I mentioned, I think if we weren't doing it, the market wouldn't be. So there was an evolution, I think, in both on the county council level and within past and current administration to clearly view this as the government's role. The second, and this was mentioned in one of your prior slides, was land banking, acquiring and controlling land so that we can develop it based on, I say, the county's vision, but it's really the community's vision, because of the community feedback. So that was, Lima Ola was purchased, as I mentioned, a decade ago without an exactly clear idea of what are we going to do with it. And we're continuing to even beyond the Waimea property and the Kilauea property that we talked about, continuing to explore other opportunities to acquire land, even though we don't really have the capacity to develop it all at the same time. That and not being afraid to leap and move forward with our and learn from other jurisdictions and places and try to copy best practices.
Great. Good advice. Political will, that's always important. So when you have that will, you can really make things happen. I guess, how is this rising interest rate environment affecting you folks, and how are you trying to cope with it? I don't know if you've got our developers under contract already, so it's you're not too worried, or is it, or in that second phase of maybe your lots where the folks need to start building their homes on the single family lots, and what do you think rising interest rates how they're gonna impact that, or what's top of mind for you guys on Kauai?
Sure. So when we were modeling our single family development at Lima Ola pre-COVID, as I mentioned, interest rates were 3.5%. Building costs had not yet been affected by COVID related supply chain problems, and we had no real concerns that households at the 120% area median income level would be able to qualify for private financing for homes at cost. So we had little concern about that development of that project. But with the movement of interest rates, so I'll back up. So based on the income levels for 120% households and interest rates at the time, there should have been no problem for buyers to qualify for $500,000, $470,000 three and four bedroom homes. At a 7.5% interest rate environment, buying power has been reduced on paper, at least, by $100,000 to $200,000, depending on exactly who we talk to. So, and construction costs have gone up with material prices. So, we're working with our private developer to redesign our pro forma to a realistic understanding of today's construction costs. And if buyers are, when we offer the homes, the first tranche of homes to home buyers, and they seek financing through the private market, if they are unable to find financing, we're ready to step in with some sort of second mortgages or some level of subsidy to be sure that we're not going to have lots sitting empty. But exactly what that is going to require, we're still figuring that out.
Yeah, lots to just keep on moving. When one thing gets thrown at you, you just gotta figure it out and make it work. But I think, honestly, I think you're on the right track. I think you're doing some great things. I think this is a very, very important model that you're doing and leading. And, I told this to Senator Chang, we don't, sometimes you don't have to fly all the way to Vienna or Hong Kong or Singapore to see some great things happening. We have something that's happening right in our own backyard on Kauai. And so I think we need to figure out how to cultivate that. We need to figure out how to make that replicated on each of the neighbor islands, especially because we do have a lot of ag lands on the neighbor islands. And so I think that is something that the county governments need to play that role, leverage federal financing. And of course, I think the state sometimes just needs to get out of the way and support the counties in the ways that they want to develop. But any parting thoughts, Adam? I think great conversation today. Any last words you want the audience to know?
No, I appreciate the invitation, and I am enjoying hearing and learning from all the other presenters. Lots of great ideas that I'm sure we could learn from as well to hone what we're doing.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Adam. Appreciate your time and the great discussion and presentation. So I would like to thank you for joining us today. I think thank you to Senator Chang for hosting this great line of speakers. I think I'm also learning quite a bit. And so next you will hear from Honolulu City Council member Tyler Dos Santos Tam. And following that, Hawaii Public Housing Authority Director Hakeem Oansafi, who will present about the agency's plan to build 10,000 new units for Hawaii residents. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.